You're looking to understand ancient India, right? To really get a handle on how we know what we know, but without drowning in, endless details.
Yeah, chasing those aha moments without feeling like you're reading a dense textbook.
Exactly. Well, that's precisely what we're aiming for today. We're diving deep into the primary sources for ancient and early medieval Indian history.
Think of it like a guided tour. We'll cover everything from, say, the oldest hymns and epic poems.
To what archaeologists find underground.
Precisely. Archaeological sites, inscriptions carved in stone, even old coins. They all tell a story.
And the mission.
The mission is to pull out the really crucial bits of knowledge from all these different sources, show how historians use them to reconstruct the past, and hopefully give you those key insights without the overwhelm.
Okay, let's unpack this. When we talk ancient history, often the first thing that comes to mind is old texts, old books, and yeah, literary works are definitely fundamental.
Absolutely. But it's so important to remember these ancient texts, whether it's the Vedas or the great epics, they're not just straightforward historical reports.
They're connected to their time, obviously, but they're more complex than that.
Exactly. They're shaped by the people who created them, their viewpoints, their intentions. They need careful interpretation.
And it's fascinating because many of these weren't even written down initially, were they?
Not for centuries. Passed down orally, generation after generation. Imagine the potential for changes, slight shifts in emphasis before they ever got recorded on, say, fragile palm leaves.
And even then, it's not like one person sat down and wrote the whole thing.
Rarely. You often have multiple authors, maybe over long periods, so we have to ask, who were they? What was their social class, their religion? Were they men, women? Where did they live? Who was their audience? Were they connected to power structures? All these things matter.
Right. And it's not just who wrote it, but what kind of writing it is. Is it poetry? A play? Is it mythology? We can't read it like a modern news report.
Definitely not. Take religious texts. The Vedas, for instance. They're considered Shruti, that which was heard, divinely revealed.
And the Rig Veda, one of the 4 main Vedas, is incredibly old, isn't it? It's the oldest poetry we have from India.
It really is. Dating it precisely is, well, tricky. You see, ranges from 6,000 BCE all the way to 1,000 BCE.
Wow, that's a huge range.
It is. But most historians tend to narrow it down, perhaps to the 1500 to 500 BCE timeframe. It gives us this glimpse into early Vedic society, pastoral life, not many cities mentioned, suggests maybe a more nomadic lifestyle back then.
And then there are the Vedangas, sort of like manuals to understand the Vedas.
Kind of, yeah. Supplementary texts designed to help with pronunciation, ritual, grammar, ensuring the Vedas were preserved and understood correctly. But fundamentally, the Vedas reflect the worldview of a specific group, mainly Brahmin males in the north and northwest. Direct historical events, not so much their focus.
Okay, then we get to the epics. The Ramayana and Mahabharata, huge, powerful stories everyone knows.
Deeply embedded in the culture. The Mahabharata is just massive. It's got the core story of this huge conflict, this war.
But it's more than just a war story, right?
Oh, much more. It's almost encyclopedic. Myths, legends, deep philosophical discussions like the Bhagavad Gita, social rules, you name it. It's all in there.
And the Ramayana.
Right.
More focused.
Generally, yes. It centers on the life of Rama, traditionally attributed to a single sage, Valmiki, but like the Mahabharata, it clearly grew over time. There are layers, later editions, and countless versions. Jaina versions, Buddhist versions, regional versions across India, even into Southeast Asia.
Which brings up the big question, how much of this is actual history? People talk about the Mahabharata war happening maybe around 1000 BCE.
Right, and archaeology at sites mentioned in the epic, like Hastinapura, does show settlements from roughly that time. They find a specific type of pottery, painted grayware.
That pottery style you mentioned earlier.
Exactly, it's a marker for that period and culture. But, and this is crucial, finding pottery doesn't prove the specific events or characters of the epic actually existed as described.
So archaeology confirms people lived there then, but not necessarily that the epic story unfolded exactly that way.
Precisely. And it's similar with the Ramayana. Excavations at Ayodhya show very old settlements, going back perhaps to 700 BCE or even earlier with related pottery types. But again, that doesn't automatically validate the entire epic narrative. Literary evidence and archaeological evidence are different kinds of information.
It's fascinating how different religious traditions give us their own texts. What about Buddhism?
Buddhist literature offers a really important alternative perspective, often outside the Brahmanical mainstream. You've got the core canonical texts, the Tipitaka, the 3 baskets, usually in Pali.
3 baskets.
Yeah, the Sutta Pitaka, which contains the Buddha's discourses and sermons. Then the Vinaya Pitaka, the rules for monks and nuns, and the Abhidhamma Pitaka, which is more philosophical, a later systematization of the teachings.
And these were written down much later.
Yes, compiled over centuries through councils, and finally written down, tradition says, in Sri Lanka. Besides the Tipitaka, you have Jataka tale stories of the Buddha's past lives, very popular.
I've heard of those.
And then there are these amazing collections, the Theragatha and Theragatha poems by early Buddhist nuns and monks, really personal, powerful accounts of their experiences. They give us a voice, especially women's voices, that are often missing elsewhere.
So a completely different viewpoint on ancient Indian society and religion.
Absolutely. And similarly, Jaina literature, the Siddhanta or Agama, mostly in Ardhamagari provides another non-Brahmanical perspective.
Are they used as much by historians?
Perhaps not quite as extensively as Buddhist sources historically, but they are incredibly valuable. They tell us about Jaina beliefs, monastic rules, the history of their saints or Tirthankaras. And like Buddhism, Jainism also split into different schools like the Shvetambaras and Digambaras, and their texts reflect some of those differences.
Okay, moving south now. Sangam literature in Tamil, that sounds really distinct.
Oh, it is. It's a corpus of poetry in Old Tamil, dating roughly from the 3rd century BCE to the 3rd century CE. Legend talks about 3 sangams, or literary academies, where these poems were composed.
Are those academies historical fact?
That's debated, but the poems themselves are real, and they give us these vivid pictures of early South Indian life, love, war, society, trade. Very rich descriptions.
And later Tamil works too.
Yes, after the Sangam period, around the 5th century CE and later, you get important didactic works like the Tirukural, famous for its ethical teachings, and 2 major epics, Silappatikaram and Manimekalai. Interestingly, Silappatikaram has Jaina leanings, while Manimekalai is Buddhist.
Wow, so different religious friends even within the Tamil epics.
Exactly. And then in the early medieval period, you get this flowering of devotional poetry, the hymns of the Shaiva Nainars and Vaishnava Alvars. Intense personal expressions of faith, hugely influential.
It feels like literature is really branching out regionally by this point.
Definitely. We see early Kannada literature emerging, like the Kaviraj in the 9th century, often with Jaina authors, and Telugu literature starts taking shape around the 11th century, famously with Nanaya's translation of parts of the Mahabharata. It shows this growing tapestry of languages and literary traditions across the subcontinent.
Beyond these big religious and epic categories, what else is there?
Oh, a whole spectrum. Incredible classical Sanskrit poetry and drama. Think of Kalidasa. His plays and poems are masterpieces. Narrative literature, too, like the Panchatantra, those clever animal fables that traveled the
I
world.
don't know those.
And then there's a huge amount of technical literature. Grammar, like Panini's foundational work. Treatises on statecraft, Kautilya's Arthashastra is a famous one. Astronomy, medicine, logic, philosophy, the darshanas. Even text on things like agriculture, like the Krishi Parashara.
A text just on farm.
An ancient Sanskrit one, yeah. It shows the breadth of knowledge being recorded.
What about works that feel more like, well, history, as we might think of it?
That's interesting. You get royal biographies called Charitas. Bhattacharya's Harsha Charita, about King Harsha, is a key example from the 7th century.
Are they reliable history?
Well, they are definitely valuable, but you have to read them critically. They were usually written by court poets, so they tend to be eulogistic, praising the king. Bhattacharya certainly paints Harsha in a very positive light, and he even talks quite a bit about his own rather colorful life. So, valuable details, but with a layer of praise, maybe some bias.
So not objective reporting.
Not in the modern sense. A bit later, though, in the 12th century, you get Kalhana's Rajatarangini, a history of the kings of Kashmir. Kalhana actually shows some awareness of historical method, trying to consult different sources, but even his work mixes legend and fact. It's a reminder that their idea of history wasn't quite the same as ours.
So literary sources give us narratives, ideas, perspectives, but they have layers we need to peel back.
Exactly. Now, what if we want to get our hands dirty, metaphorically speaking? What about the physical stuff left behind?
Archaeology, digging into the past.
Precisely. Archaeology studies the past through material remains, things people made, used, built, and left behind. It's about understanding past cultures, how people lived from these physical traces.
And archaeologists look for sites, right? Often mounds.
Yes, settlements built up over time often form mounds. Finding them can happen by accident. Sometimes old texts give clues, or through systematic surveys. And nowadays, tech like aerial photos or remote sensing helps a lot.
But what we find isn't the whole picture, is it?
Far from it. Think about what survives. Stone, pottery, metal, inorganic stuff lasts longer. Wood, textiles, food remains, they decay, especially in climates like India's. And we mostly find things people discarded or lost. It's always an incomplete record. Sites get disturbed, destroyed.
So how do they make sense of what they do find?
Careful excavation is key. It's done layer by layer. This is based on stratigraphy, the idea that lower layers are generally older than upper layers, like cutting a slice through time.
And documenting everything is vital.
Absolutely crucial. Every find, its exact location, the soil layer, it all gets recorded, drawn, photographed. Because excavation is destructive, you can't put it back. And analysis and publication are just as important, sharing the findings.
You mentioned surveys and remote sensing. Is the focus shifting?
There's definitely a trend towards landscape archaeology, understanding how a site relates to its wider environment, not just digging one spot. And non-destructive methods are increasingly used first.
Can you give an example of what excavation reveals?
Sure. Take the Hastinapura Mound excavation we mentioned earlier. It showed this sequence of cultures. You had the ochre-colored pottery level, then a break, then the painted grayware associated with the later Vedic period, then another break, possibly caused by a flood mentioned in texts, then the northern black polished ware period. It gives a timeline, shows changes, disruptions.
And marine archaeology, finding things underwater.
Yeah, that's really exciting. Discoveries off the coast of Dwarka, for instance. Submerged structures, artifacts. It opens up possibilities about ancient ports, maybe pushing back dates for maritime activity. Still much research needed, but very promising.
What about the science side of archaeology, dating things?
Hugely important. Carbon-14 dating is the best known. It measures the decay of radioactive carbon in organic materials, wood, charcoal, bone. It gives you a date range, say 1500 BCE plus or minus 80 years.
Plus or minus, so it's not exact.
It gives a probability range. These dates need calibration against things like tree rings, and they work best on organic stuff up to about 50,000 years old. Then there's thermoluminescence for dating pottery, potassium argon for volcanic rock, different methods for different materials and timescales.
And analyzing the materials themselves.
Yeah, that's archaeometry. Chemical analysis of pottery can tell you where the clay came from, maybe suggesting trade routes. Analyzing metal artifacts reveals alloys, manufacturing techniques. Soil analysis can show ancient field systems. At Inamgan, for example, analyzing soil showed crop patterns, and finding marine shells far inland pointed to trade networks.
And human remains?
Paleontology and physical anthropology look at animal and human bones. Animal bones tell us about diet, environment. Human bones can reveal diet, diseases, average height, sometimes even social status based on burial goods or health indicators.
It sounds like archaeology is becoming very scientific.
It has integrated a lot of scientific techniques. There have also been theoretical shifts, debates about how to interpret the evidence, focusing on processes versus cultural meanings, the processual versus post-processual approaches.
So what unique things does archaeology tell us that texts don't?
Oh, loads. Anything before writing that's entirely archaeology. Understanding cultures with undeciphered scripts, like the Harappan civilization. The lives of ordinary people, their houses, tools, crafts, things texts often ignore. Technology, trade networks, how settlements were laid out. Even trying to understand how ancient people thought cognitive archaeology.
But linking a specific archaeological culture, like that painted grayware, to a specific group mentioned in texts, say the people of the Mahabharata, that's difficult.
It's very tricky. An archaeological culture is defined by a set of material traits found together. Matching that neatly with an ethnic or linguistic group from texts is often problematic. Correlation isn't causation.
I heard about ethnoarchaeology, studying living people.
Right. The idea is to study traditional communities today whose practices might echo past ways of life, like observing modern potters or bead makers, say in Kambat for Harappan beads, to understand ancient techniques, or studying hunter-gatherer groups.
Does that work?
It can provide valuable analogies and insights, but you have to be cautious. Societies change. You can't assume a direct, unchanging link over thousands of years. It's one tool among many.
And new research directions.
There's growing interest in the social aspects of technology, not just how tools or pottery were made, but why they were made that way, their function, their social meaning within that society. Looking at pottery production in villages like Guniali, for instance, trying to understand the whole system.
And protecting these sites is obviously important.
Critically important. Sites are constantly under threat from development, looting, salvage archaeology, rescuing information before a site is destroyed. Like the huge effort at Nagarjunakonda before the dam submerged it is vital, but often a race against time.
Okay, let's move on to inscriptions, writings on stone or metal.
Exactly. Epigraphy is the study of inscriptions, and paleography is the study of ancient writing systems themselves. Inscriptions, like coins, are technically archaeological finds, but they're special because they contain written language.
And the oldest writing we have is
The Harappan script, still undeciphered, which is a huge puzzle.
so frustrating.
It really is. The oldest deciphered scripts are Brahmi and Kharosthi, appearing prominently with the inscriptions of Emperor Ashoka around the 3rd century BCE.
Is there writing between the Harappans and Ashoka?
That's the mystery gap. Hundreds, maybe over 1,000 years, with very little evidence of writing. We get literary references to writing later in Buddhist texts and Panini's grammar. And some recent finds might push the date of Brahmi back a bit before Ashoka, but there's still a big gap after the Harappans.
What were these early scripts like, Brahmi and Kharosthi?
They're interesting. Not quite alphabets like ours, more like semi-syllabic systems where consonants often have an inherent vowel sound that can be modified. Kharosthi was used mainly in the northwest, near modern Pakistan and Afghanistan. It's written right to left, likely derived from Aramaic script from West Asia.
And Brahmi.
Brahmi is written left to right. Its origin is debated, maybe indigenous, maybe also influenced by Aramaic, we're not entirely sure. But Brahmi is incredibly important because it's the ancestor of almost all scripts used in South Asia and many in Southeast Asia today.
So modern Indian scripts like Devanagari evolved from Brahmi.
Yes, through various stages, Ashokan Brahmi, then Kushana, Gupta styles, later forms like Siddhamatrika, and eventually Nagari, which became Devanagari, Bengali, Oriya scripts in the north, and Sharada in Kashmir.
And in the south.
You have Tamil Brahmi inscriptions early on, adapting the script for the Tamil language. Later, distinct scripts like Grantha for Sanskrit, Vatulutu, and modern Tamil and Kannada Telugu scripts evolved from Brahmi too. It's a whole family tree of scripts.
Wow, and the languages used in these inscriptions changed too.
They did. The earliest Brahmi inscriptions, like Ashoka's, are mostly in Prakrit languages, regional vernaculars. Then you start seeing a mix of Sanskrit and Prakrit, and eventually classical Sanskrit becomes dominant for official inscriptions, especially from the Gupta period onwards. The Junagadh rock inscription of Rudradaman around 150 CE is a famous early example of fairly standard Sanskrit.
And regional languages.
They appear later. Tamil is very early in the south. Kannada and Telugu inscriptions start appearing in the mid-1st millennium CE, then Marathi, Oriya, and others follow in the early medieval period.
How on earth did people figure out how to read these forgotten scripts?
That's an amazing story, especially for Brahmi. It was deciphered in the 1830s, primarily by James Prinsep in Calcutta. He built on earlier work, noticed patterns, compared short inscriptions on coins and pillars. A key breakthrough was finding bilingual coins of Indo-Greek kings.
Coins help.
Yes, coins with Greek on one side and Kharosthi or Brahmi on the other gave crucial clues. For Brahmi, Prinsep realized many inscriptions ended with the nam, gift. He then matched names on coins with kings mentioned in texts. The final piece was connecting the title Piyadasi, found in many Brahmi edicts, with Emperor Ashoka, thanks to chronicles from Sri Lanka provided by George Turner.
That must have been an incredible moment.
Absolutely, unlocking centuries of history. Kharosthi was deciphered slightly earlier, also using those bilingual coins, but some scripts, like Harappan, remain mysteries.
How do we know when an inscription was made? The dating.
Often they are dated, sometimes by the regnal year of the ruling king in the 10th year of King so-and-so, or they use specific eras. There were several important ones. The Vikrama era, starting 57 BCE, the Shaka era, 78 CE, the Gupta era, 319-320 CE, the Kolam era in Kerala.
So they had calendars like us.
Yes, often complex lunisolar calendars. Converting those dates precisely to our Gregorian calendar can be tricky. You need to know the exact system used, whether years were counted as expired or current, how they handled lunar months. It requires expertise.
What kinds of things did people inscribe? What were the purposes?
A huge variety. You have donative inscriptions recording gifts, usually to religious figures or institutions, like, I, Merchant X, donate this pillar. Dedicative ones mark the building of temples, wells, tanks. Commemorative inscriptions mark important events, a royal visit, a victory, or something personal. Ashoka's pillar at Lumbini saying, "Here the Buddha was born," is commemorative.
And memorials.
Yes, very common. Memorial stones for fallen heroes, hero stones, or viragals are famous in Karnataka. or chaya stambas, shadow pillars, in Andhra. They often depict the event and give details about the person. We even have one from Nagarjunakonda commemorating an artisan, Mulaputta, showing ordinary people were sometimes memorialized, or inscriptions detailing donations by royal women of the Ikshvaku dynasty, giving insight into their status and influence.
What about official royal stuff? Land grants.
Very important. Royal charters granting land or villages, usually to Brahmins or temples, were typically inscribed on copper plates bound together with a royal seal. These give amazing detail about administration, land tenure, taxation, and village life.
And inscriptions just praising the king.
Ah, yes, prashastas, eulogies, often poetic, full of praise, listing the king's victories and virtues. The Hathigumpha inscription of King Karavela of Kalinga is a long, detailed one. Samudragupta's Allahabad pillar inscription, composed by his court poet Harishina, is another classic example, lists all the kings he supposedly defeated.
So, like the biographies, you have to read them with a critical eye for exaggeration.
Definitely. They tell you what the king wanted people to think, but they still provide invaluable political and geographical information. Sometimes they even record public works, like that Junagadh inscription, which mentions repairs to the Sudarshana Lake by different rulers over centuries.
What are the advantages of inscriptions over, say, manuscripts?
Their biggest advantage is durability. Stone and metal last much better than palm leaf or birch bark. They're generally contemporary to the events they record, and they're fixed in a specific location, which helps with historical geography, knowing exactly where something happened or where a place mentioned in texts actually was, like finding the location of Kapilavastu through inscriptions.
So what kind of history do we get overall from inscriptions?
A massive amount. Political history, boundaries of kingdoms, royal genealogies, though again, watch for propaganda, like omitting inconvenient predecessors like Ramagupta in Gupta lists or rival kings making contradictory claims. Administrative systems, tax details, social and economic history, foundation of settlements, land relations, types of labor, mentions of different castes and professions. There's even a Chola inscription recording farmer grievances.
Really?
Yeah. Religious history, patronage of temples, monasteries, specific sects like the Ajivikas who are barely mentioned in texts. Art history, inscriptions on sculptures or temple walls help date them. History of languages and literature. Even performing arts, there's an inscription at Kudumiyamalai about music. Tamil inscriptions mention dances.
That's incredibly diverse.
It is, though sometimes interpretation is tricky. There's a famous inscription in the Siddhabenga cave in Chhattisgarh. Is it describing an ancient theater and poetry recitals as something? Or was it just a resting place for a temple dancer, Devadasi, and her painter lover, as others argue based on the wording? The evidence can be ambiguous.
Fascinating. Okay, last source. Coins.
Numismatics.
Right. Coins usually pieces of metal used as currency. We study the front, obverse, the back, reverse, and the metal, weight, design, any writing legends, and finding them is key.
Where they're found tells us about circulation areas. Hoards, collections of coins buried together, are especially important. They give a snapshot of the currency in use at a specific time and place. Studying the weight metrology is also revealing. Coins lose weight with use, so sometimes you can sequence issues by weight. And scientific analysis, like X-ray fluorescence, XRF, can tell us the exact metal composition without damaging the coin, revealing purity, debasement over time, or sources of metal.
Did ancient India have standard weights for coins?
Yes, based on units like the rati or gunja seed. A common standard for early silver punch-marked coins was around 32 ratis. But remember, coinage didn't eliminate barter. Both often existed together for different kinds of transactions.
They were the earliest Indian coins like.
Punch-marked coins. Irregular shapes, mostly silver, sometimes copper. They don't have writing, just symbols punched onto the metal blanks. Geometric shapes, animals, plants, maybe religious or political symbols. Their exact meaning is often uncertain. Different series seem linked to regions like Taxila, Kosala, Avanti, with the Magadan series becoming dominant.
The symbols punched on.
Yes. And sometimes later symbols punched over earlier ones, countermarks. Soon after, you also get uninscribed cast copper coins made using molds.
When did writing appear on coins?
With the Indo-Greeks in the northwest, maybe 2nd century BCE, their coins are beautiful, often with realistic portraits of kings and Greek gods on one side, and legends in Greek and local scripts like Koroshti or Brahmi on the other.
And those helped decipher the scripts.
Exactly, especially Koroshti. They also depicted Indian deities. Sometimes Balarama and Krishna appear on coins of King Agathocles, which is amazing early evidence. And the Indo-Greeks issued the first gold coins known in the subcontinent.
Then came the Kushanas.
Yes, and they issued lots of gold coins, suggesting a flourishing economy, maybe fueled by trade like the Silk Road. Fewer silver, but many copper coins too. Typically the king's figure, name, and titles on the obverse, and a huge variety of deities on the reverse Greek, Iranian, Buddhist, Hindu, shows a very diverse cultural world. Legends were often in Greek script, sometimes Kharosthi.
What about other regions?
In the western Deccan, the Kshatrapes, like Nahapana, issued silver coins, suggesting silver was more in demand there. We also see Roman gold coins flowing into India through trade, and local imitations being made. Different coin types often circulated side by side. In the south, you get punch-marked coins with dynastic symbols, like the Pandya fish, and later coins from Cholas, Cheras, Pandyas with legends and sometimes portraits.
What about the early medieval period? Was there a decline in coins?
That used to be the view decline in trade, fewer coins. But scholars like John Dial have challenged that. They argue that while coin designs might become less artistic, the actual volume in circulation might not have decreased as much as previously thought. We definitely have coins from Pallavas with lion or bull motifs, cholas, tiger crest, sometimes mentioning mint towns, pandyas, found even in Sri Lanka.
Well, maybe not a decline, just different patterns.
Perhaps. And we shouldn't forget cowrie shells. They were used as currency for small transactions alongside coins for centuries, right into recent times in some areas. Archaeological finds confirm this.
So what do coins tell historians overall?
They're crucial for monetary history, obviously, tracking trade routes, economic connections, language history from the legends, religious history from the deities and symbols, and political history, names of kings, their titles, approximate dates, extent of their rule. Sometimes they fill gaps left by other sources.
Can they tell us about the kings themselves?
Sometimes, yes. Coin types can give biographical hints. Chandragupta Thiti's coins celebrating his marriage to a Lichavi princess, which boosted Gupta prestige. Coins helped confirm the existence of Ramagupta, a Gupta king mentioned in a play but omitted from official genealogies. Samudragupta's coins showing him performing the Ashvamedha horse sacrifice, or Kumaragupta the Tras coins doing the same.
And personality.
Maybe hints. Samudragupta issued coins showing himself as a warrior archer, but also as a musician playing the lyre, Vizina. Suggests different facets of his royal image.
You mentioned counterstruck coins earlier.
Ah, yes, the Nahapana coins overstruck by Gautamiputra Satakarni. That's a fantastic example found in the Jogolthembi hoard. Nahapana, the Kshatrapa ruler, issued silver coins influenced by Indo-Greek styles. Then Gautamiputra, the Satavahana king who defeated him, took Nahapana's coins and stamped his own symbols like the arched hill and the Ujjain symbol right over Nahapana's portrait.
Wow, like stamping I won on your enemy's money.
Pretty much. It's a clear statement of political dominance. It also helps historians establish chronology, placing Nahapana just before Gautamiputra. And practically, it kept existing silver in circulation, avoiding disruption, while marking it as now belonging to the new ruler.
So wrapping this all up then, we've covered a huge range of sources.
We really have. Literary texts, archaeology, inscriptions, coins, each gives us a different window onto ancient and early medieval India.
And each comes with its own strengths, but also its own challenges for interpretation, right? Texts have biases, archaeology is incomplete, inscriptions can be propaganda, coins tell specific kinds of stories.
Exactly. History isn't just about finding facts, it's about carefully evaluating these diverse, sometimes contradictory pieces of evidence. It's a constant process of analysis, synthesis, questioning, like assembling a massive jigsaw puzzle where some pieces are missing and others don't quite fit perfectly.
But piecing it together is how we build our understanding.
Absolutely, and there's always more to learn, new discoveries, new ways to interpret the evidence.
So a final thought for everyone listening. Just consider how our understanding of a single artifact, maybe a coin or a potsherd or a line from an ancient poem, can shift dramatically depending on what other sources we bring alongside it and what questions we're actually asking of the past.
It really underscores how dynamic history is. It's not static, it's an ongoing conversation with the past based on the evidence we have.